Hello, good evening and welcome to the first lecture of our 2026 lecture series with the rather ominous but seemingly appropriate title, Enough. My name is Jeffrey Toon. I'm a professor of architecture here in the college, and I currently serve as the university's Associate Vice President for Research in Social Sciences, Humanities, and the Arts, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Tonight's talk is supported by the Guido A. and Elizabeth Binda Exhibit and Lecture Fund. For 7 decades, Julia Binda served the community across Western Michigan and specialized in school design. With his wife, Elizabeth, he created this fund to provide for an exhibition program and an annual lecture by an esteemed colleague. Tonight's speaker, Dr. Karla Saldana Ochoa, is an assistant professor in the School of Architecture at the University of Florida. She is a faculty affiliate of the AI2 Center, the Center of Latin American Studies, and the Florida Institute for Built Environment Resilience, or FIBER. At UF, she directs the AI in Architecture Graduate Certificate Program and oversees the SHARE Lab, a research group focused on developing projects that leverage the interaction between artificial intelligence and human intelligence, applied to enhance creativity in architectural design and create tools that analyze the big data of urban phenomena. Karla works with digital twins, which she defines as intelligent environments, focusing on how this technology can be applied across scales, from buildings to citywide infrastructure. She currently collaborates on international projects in Switzerland, Mexico, Germany, Italy, and Ecuador. Karla is an Ecuadorian architect and coder, specific addendum, with a Master of Advanced Studies in Landscape Architecture and a PhD in Technology and Architecture from the ETH in Zurich. Her doctoral research focused on the integration of artificial and human intelligence to achieve accurate and agile responses to natural disasters, utilizing a multimodal fusion approach from machine learning inference. The ways in which we'll engage with AI and its possible futures are shaping perhaps some of the most pressing questions of our time. Will the resulting search for rare minerals lead to unprecedented global and extraterrestrial conflict? Will AI enable medical breakthroughs and discoveries that cure our most persistent diseases? Will AI-supportive infrastructures pressurize energy systems and drive grid instability? Will advanced AI lead to new machinic species and, in turn, new potentials for multi-species becoming with? For us as designers, how might AI enable new formats of co-creativity and responsiveness? Tonight, Karla will share with us her work and thinking spanning the pragmatic and generative potentials across AI and spanning scales across the built environment. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Karla Saldana Ochoa.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm going to try to make a presentation that is exciting for everyone. I titled this presentation Instrumental Intelligence, the Past, Present, and Future of Instruments for Design. And I would like to start first by setting up the table. So we understand each other because we have shared concepts. Some of these concepts are familiar because we live in the world where we share the same physics. And we also have created theorems that explain some of the things that we cannot see, like, for example, the parallel theorem from Euclidean geometry. And that gives us some vocabulary to start doing some analogies. Like, for example, if I say your thoughts and mine are parallel, we will think that we think alike. But that will not happen if we were not in the same world. So let's imagine that we have a generation of humans living in a small sphere, and their thoughts and their lives are framed within this small sphere. So the same analogy that I presented to you that is about parallels wouldn't happen here, because in a small sphere, the idea of parallelism doesn't work. It will eventually have a contact, and it won't be the same concept. Why am I talking about analogies? It's because analogies are very powerful instruments of thought. And in his book, Surface and Essence by Douglas Hofstadter, he explains that without analogies, there cannot be concepts, and without concepts, there cannot be thought. Analogies allow our minds to link with past experiences, with new ones, and are shaping how we categorize, interpret, and interact with our world. What I want to talk about is that I'm going to present to you some analogies of how I think about artificial intelligence with some of the things that we share in our architectural practice. And I want to use them to help us learn and to help us create more ideas for the future. So let's start with technology. And I invite you to create one analogy with technology. So throughout time, technology has been described as an art, a skill, a craft, a method, and a system that is aiding to create conceptual thinking to understand the world. And one of the things as well is that as architects, we are trained to create visualization or to bring our thoughts to a visual output, which I think plays a critical role to how we understand the world. And I think the visualizations are the ones that help us transform anything we see in reality into a reasonable input for our brains to process. So let's look at one visualization. So an example of technology could be, for example, the gnomon. The gnomon was used by Thales when he traveled to Egypt. When he went there, he wanted to know the size of the pyramid. Nobody could give him an answer because this was an inaccessible object. Nobody knew how tall this pyramid was, but he devised a technology, which was at the time this stick that he planted in the ground, and through the Pythagoras theorem, he was able to identify how big the pyramid was because he related with the size of the diamond and the shadow it casted. But the gnomon, as I told you, as we talked about, served here as an instrument to help him measure the pyramid height. But we know that the gnomon, it's been written as the one that tells time because it was usually used to tell us the season of the year. So this technology became two things, right? An instrument and a tool. Not to go too far, we have another technology. This is quipus from the Incas tribes. They use this to store and record knowledge. So these are a set of strings that are representing specific things, either they're counting or telling specific things of the land that they have. So usually they consider this as a counting system, but what we recognize is that people started using quipus to be like a library or indexing knowledge. So technology, as I say here, it is not only a tool for counting, but can also be an index for storing knowledge. So here we go. The analogy I'm presenting today is to think about technology as a tool, similar to a lever, a motor, that is useful, is optimal, and it allows to get something done. And also use it as an instrument, like a piece of paper, a pen, or a violin, that it only enacts or articulates something masterful if we have a human that is masterful enough to play with it. So here I'm saying tools are to use and instruments are to play. So I want to talk about how we get to this analogy with AI. So we got to technology. I show you two ancestral technological means that we had. And I said AI could be also this technology. I invite you to think of AI as a tool or an instrument, and both are neither better or worse. They are complementary to the way we can see AI applied in architecture. So let's go to describing what is AI. So artificial intelligence are these technologies or techniques that enable machines to mimic humans. And industry and academia has been working on creating these techniques and tools and have been solving several problems like object recognition, semantic segmentation, text generation, and many, many more. And throughout this idea of passing something called the Turing test, they have developed all of these algorithms that we can use today. But if we want to go and try to do an X-ray of AI, we see that AI really has two specific areas of research. The first one that I call is symbolic manipulation, which are logic-based algorithms that are following rules, like a decision tree model, which is one of the, let's say, up until 1980s was the most used AI techniques. So they were trying to synthesize everything based on a rule system. But after the 1980s, we see a push towards the second branch of research that is called neural simulation. So here we're trying to make mathematical abstractions of how our neural system works. So we started using something called neural networks. But with these neural networks, artificial neural networks, what we have is that there are two branches as well. One that is trying to explain how our brain works, and the other one that is trying to create just a mathematical abstraction of the most basic understanding of how our brain works, because we don't know yet how it works. We have thousands of theories. We haven't really come up to one that fits every single idea of or thought about how our brain works. What is interesting with that, up until I said 1995, this is a book published by Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig, two of the most prominent people in the AI sphere. They wrote this book called A Modern Approach, and they categorized AI in 5 sections. They say you can have AI that is about expert systems, AI that is about computer vision, AI that is about natural language processing, robotics, and they call one line of research machine learning. If you pay attention to these different areas of AI, each of them have specific inputs. Like, for example, computer vision was trying to make machines see. So a lot of the input that these algorithms will treat will be images or videos. If you see natural language processing is about having the machine read, so you will have text. Up until 1995, machine learning was just one specific application of how you can achieve these techniques to mimic human behavior. So they will use something called, for example, logistic regression, which was trying to find a function that will be able to interpolate through a data that it learned. But what happened today? Right. This was until 1995. It was very clear we could map. There are 5 areas of research. I can define an algorithm. I can define an application, and they are all very well categorized. What happened today? Today, we have machine learning overtaking the whole panorama of different AI applications. But not only that, is that we have something called multimodal fusion, which means that we have, I don't know if it's too loud. I get excited, sorry, like come here. But what means is that we have different algorithms that we're supposed to be working with one type of data, but at the end are working with different modalities of data. So for example, you have algorithms like ChatGPT, which is using expert systems and natural language processing. You have algorithms that are, for example, for image generation that are using computer vision and natural language processing. So right now, if we were trying to define where we are, if before I was telling you that the meaning of AI is techniques and algorithms that aim to mimic human behavior, if we move to machine learning is techniques and algorithms that learn from data to mimic human behavior. And now we have a new word that is called artificial general intelligence. Have you heard about artificial general intelligence? Everybody's saying if we get there, it's going to replace us, it's the end of the world. Artificial general intelligence really is what we're seeing here, which is trying to have algorithms that have this multimodal data fusion. So my point here is that this whole panorama of AI could really be categorized in what I just presented with my analogy of tools and instruments. So in order to make the distinction of how to use AI as a tool or as an instrument, we just have to see the way that we interact with it. If we want to build a model that is optimal, that is trying to arrive to a solution that could be generalizable, that it does really need to be precise, you will use it as a tool. But not all the time you want that. Sometimes you want to be able to play with it. You want it to be an instrument of thought. You want it to be able to articulate something that is as part as yours and as part as this instrument. So what I'm going to talk today, I said one of the one of the important things of our careers is to be able to visualize things that are not present precisely, is I want to show you how I have used AI as a tool and AI as an instrument through my work. So I want to start with AI as a tool. So we know that through all these Turing tests, we've created all of these different algorithms that are really good at doing things like, for example, seeing. So we used computer vision to help us identify objects, to help us define what these objects are, and to help us segment those objects from those images. We have this algorithm. How do we use it? So one application that I did during my PhD was I have an algorithm that is able to tell me that's a house. Could I use the same algorithm to tell me that's a house in 2010 and that's a house in 2011? And if I know that's the same house, would I be able to compare whether the house has changed? But let's bring to the same idea what happened if in 2010 and 2011 there was an earthquake. So the house that happens in 2011 really has changed a lot. So what I applied is image recognition and object detection was to help me define how much changed in a very quickly manner. So I needed this algorithm to be fast, and I also needed to be precise, and I needed to be optimal. So this is how I use AI as a tool. But we also have algorithms like, for example, expert systems that are to optimize path detection. So I had, this is a hackathon that we won from the island of Toga that had an earthquake. They wanted to recognize where are their food resources. So when a disaster happened, you want to know where are you. First of all, you want to know if people are safe. Second is if people will be fed, if they have enough food to be fed. So what we did is that we used the same algorithm to recognize the type of trees, also where are the trees, and then we use the same algorithm to tell us where are the roads. So in this case, through an algorithm of optimization, we were linking the roads to a group of trees. So if you had a question about, I only have 5 minutes and I want to get more bananas, which is the road I should take? Or if if the road 1, 2, and 3 are blocked, there is only road 4 and I need to get there, how many fruits would I harvest? So these are very specific questions that will have a similar answer all the time. So I don't need to really think too much about whether answer of go to road 4 is, I will need to question that. I will just follow and then get the results because they have been proven to work. So if you want to know a bit more, here is the article. And fun fact, this is my most cited article, which is not published in architecture, but in agriculture. And I get to review so many articles about this just because we were able to create a pipeline that wasn't really only about recognizing trees and their type. But now we're getting to a much more complex space. So we're talking about urban data streams. So I was showing you disaster data. I was showing you agricultural data. Now I'm showing you urban data. One of them, I think this video is too fast, but one of the applications of these technologies can be seen when we're trying to merge some of the GIS data to describe a place. So you can get data about the housing, the water. You can also have information about demographics, population density, many, many things to describe a city. But these layers usually, it's hard to have them overlapped and to make sense. So what we're working on is to create a machine learning model that is able to join them meaningfully so we can create new ways to read at this data and to understand what is the urban structure and what are the urban needs that this population have. But not only that, but we were able to develop an agentic platform that instead of you having to code from scratch, you will be asking some of the spatial modelings that you want to do with this data, and you will get outputs directly. So here is also a publication that we did. Another type of data that we are all very used to, right? 3D data. So there are many ways to get it. So you can do through semantic modeling by modeling them from scratch, like creating a BIM model. We can do procedural texture modeling, so it's setting up rules. We can do it through point cloud models, through photogrammetry. And very recently, we are working with AI models. And I think you saw this little video, which is by using images, and a machine deep learning model, we can create 3D environments or 3D buildings. So I'm going to show you two applications of all of these different AI models that have been used as tools to create something that we call digital twins. So we're going to use tools to create a digital twin of a city. And this is Jacksonville. I don't know if you know. I teach and research at Florida. So one of the main problems that we see is flooding. And one of the things that we need the most are decision supportive tools that can help us make decisions for situations that we can't see things. Like, for example, what's the effects of flooding when septic tanks get flooded, and what is the health outcome if this happens. So we created this platform that is leveraging all the AI models that we developed, like, for example, using point cloud models to be transformed into 3D models for visualization. Then we will use this technique for layering different data sets that are talking about demographics, about different flooding predictions, and in a way that a decision maker could really use this tool to be able to see and present ideas, to imagine futures of what will it be if they change a specific thing within the city. And we had different kind of capabilities of this platform. So you can use agentic interface. So you can ask things about, I want to see this building. Show me what is the largest one. Show me if I draw this building, would it get flooded? What will be the effect of a flooding in this area? So in that way, we are addressing how will a virtual replica of a city help us make decisions? Another example, when I do videos, I tend to talk too fast, so bear with me. This is on the scale of a campus. So what we're trying to do here is talk about the risk that students feel and have when there is a disaster on the university campus. But we want to be able to merge two types of data, the quantitative that we get through all of these GIS layers, and the qualitative, which will be the one that we see when we perceive risk. So what you're seeing here is our theoretical framework of saying when you create a digital twin, you don't necessarily have to think about all the push for the technology, which is saying we will need to develop geometric models, information models, AI models. The environment needs to be immersive, it needs to be interactive, it needs to be data intensive. But we also want to know what will be the effect that this model has on people. So it's not only creating digital twins that are technology pushing forward, but it's also socially aware of how do we really help society or people who are going to interact with this model. So our idea of digital twins is not a cyber-physical system, which has been branded everywhere, but we put the word social. So we want it to be a social cyber-physical system. And with that, I just jumped to the very next slide. But so the idea is that you don't need to build, capabilities of saying this is, but you can test different applications of the continuums to create different digital twins. So here in the continuum of abstracting, we work on the different layers that I just showed you. I want to emphasize why this is important, because we tend to make decisions based on zip code, because that's the larger area that people can aggregate their information. But what we're saying, we're challenging that to say we can create other areas that are more relevant for the questions you have. And not only the areas are going to be related to, for example, flooding now, but also you will be able to see it because it's not a coding exercise. It's really an interface that allows more questioning about it. On the side of twinning, we are leveraging to what I just talked about from BIM models, semantic models, and AI models. There are models that you can use to create buildings like this, but the problem is that these data sets are used to do models like tables and toys and small-scale objects. Therefore, we needed to create a training data that has thousands of buildings so we can run our high-performance computer and create these different options to generate a city. So you can write down an address. You can get a very Floridian building, as you can see, and snapshot this building as many size as you need, use this image on the algorithm, and generate a house. And so you can do this on many, many, many buildings if you need to. Another option is what happens if you already have some already more or less detailed buildings, could I assign textures to them so they represent more precisely what that urban area looks like? So the same model now, instead of generating a building, it's actually texturing with whatever prompt we want it to be. So how do we use these tools? We use them to help us generate any environment. And the idea with these, as I keep saying, is because some of the decisions we have to make on cities, they are really relevant if they're visualized in a way that we understand. But not to lose track about why we did this project, which was trying to help capture the perception of risk that we feel when we are in a campus, for example. We are leveraging mathematical models that predict storm surge flooding, but we translate them into immersive environments. So what you're seeing on screen, these are mathematically predicted flooding events. And we can have them on virtual walks so people can experience this event and could start telling us how they feel. If they, for example, one of the questions we have is, will you stop coming to campus if the flooding gets to this level? So this is one of the experiments we're doing right now. So we have recruited about 60 students in our campus, and they're wearing their headsets. And as they're walking through these virtual environments, they get prompted with questions about, for example, if you see this building, is there any part of the building that you feel is at risk? And not only they will say the wall, but they have the opportunity to attach meaning to that wall. So they will say that wall, and I feel this maybe can fall down. So this is a data that can help us. For example, that is this blue green square attached. Is telling they define that to be at risk. I don't know if I'm doing great with time, but you'll let me know if I have to stop. So we're moving to instruments. So I told you about tools are efficient and they help us solve problems that need this optimal solution, or at least trying to be optimal. But what are instruments? And I think, as I said before, instruments are about playing and are about allowing to have a relationship between the one who is playing the instrument and the instrument itself. Like I always make this analogy about a piece of paper. So a piece of paper is an instrument because if I'm a good drawer, I can use it to make a beautiful painting. If I use it to write a poem, it also has a different meaning and output. And if I use it to make a paper plane, it also has a different outcome. So it really depends on who is working with that type of instrument. So I try to usually, the work that I do on creating AI instruments are attached to the design studios that I teach. So here, one of the applications that we did was called Playing Dimensions, because in architecture, we don't only work with images or we don't only work with text, but we work with different mediums. So we were trying to identify what are the different dimensions that we can add as data sets to help us be more... to help us reference, for in this case, for example, some precise architectural, we call them masterpieces, let's say, and then we will attach a shape, an image, and a text, and then students could, when they were doing their work, this algorithm will scan their work and will help them see where are things that could be very similar to some of the details of these masterpieces. Another work that we did with AI as an instrument. So, and just to accentuate this, the output of this algorithm, it really depends on the student's work. So it depends on what is the input that you fed, that the output of the algorithm will be different. So another work that we did through AI as an instrument was trying to create a informative form-finding, structurally stable algorithm. So usually when you're doing form-finding at the beginning of an exercise, you will like to know whether this is going to stand in our gravity-driven world, right? If you can do experimental work, but in this case, we wanted to give students an instrument that can help them design with an idea of stability. So what you're seeing here are like towers that were prompted through words. And here, these are 3D models that the students could use in their Rhino or in their Revit, whatever they were using to design, that has been proven to be structurally stable. Another application that we did, also they are like, you see, ranging from enabling more capabilities rather than replacing the whole design process, because I think the design process is so complex and layered that if you try to do an input very fast output, it won't be the same as you were thinking through a complex process to how to get there. So this study was we call it customized 3D. So if you have a model and you have a small bug model, we call them like the ones that you're trying to create when you are at the initial stage of the design process, could we scan this model and start talking with it? Say we want that piece that is red, we want it to be of a different form. Could we just write down what this form should look like? So that's the work that we did. So through this idea of changing and attaching meaning to these words that are very descriptive to the way that we talk as architects, we were able to model different shapes that were an output of this interaction between the algorithm that learned that flat, beautiful, slim, tall, strong is related to some of the specific formal representation of these models. So I'm going to play with these instruments, and I'm going to give you a warning because the next slide may make you dizzy. So here we go. This is the insides of a diffusion model. So it's layered, and it's all the time trying to find whatever prompt you said at the beginning to arrive to, like, it's trying to match images to the text, right? So what you're seeing here is I sliced this diffusion model and then screenshot the output of the layers. It looks like this. So I was using the prompt threshold, shadow, and corner, right? These are very atmospheric words, and it got me the image in the center. But I wasn't very interested about that centered image. What for me was very interesting in this exercise was everything around. And everything around created this space of possibility, and it allowed me to talk about in-between concepts. Because we've been so focused into using these diffusion models that are, I will say this, and don't hate me about it, human aligned, because they are forced to generate the cat, the dog, the chair, the table. And for me, what is interesting is to know what is the in-between concept between the cat and the hat, or the table and the dog. And this is what allowed me to do. So I'm not interested in the center, but I'm really interested into this in-between space. Can I name them? Do they mean something? Can I get something from them? Are they really? So this one was, I think it was, I don't remember the prompt, but you will see it's more like a window generation. And from that, could I start like thinking about geometry? Is this geometry something that I can put into space? But here we're again talking about images. And we know that images are so versatile when we're in the digital. So an image really can be seen through so many lenses, right? You have the RGB values, you have the edge detection, you have, I think this is Fourier transform. You have only looking at the blue channel, the red channel, the green channel, the gradient filter. So an image in the digital is so many things. So what I did, I used these different ways of seeing at my data to take the same very, DC layers that I like, pictures of the layers, to be organized into something called a self-organizing map. So this is an unsupervised machine learning algorithm that takes all of these 3,000 images and groups them based on a way of seeing. Like in this case, I was trying just to group them by patterns. Very quickly, very fast. And for me, what was interesting is then when I go into, let's say, that cell has all of these different, very interesting concepts and spaces that I didn't see before when I was printing them out. And let's look at them like in more zoom in. So with that, you can still do a lot of the processing with the images. And if you go back, you want to open another cell, you can start working with like, am I able to name that? Is this helpful for me to do something? Right. So I think this process could be so convoluted that you will say, when do I stop if this is something that makes me go into this realm of like never ending trying out ideas. So how I use this in design is that I try to create shapes that are trying to tell the concepts that I saw on the in-between space. So with that, this is a very experiential atmospheric exercise, so it doesn't arrive to the solution of the building or of whatever program you're having, but it really allows you to get to a conversational between you and the instrument that we're playing. So through this methodology that I just presented, I've created different processes, projects, ideas, and the students that work with me in the classes get to test some of these instruments that I created to do some of these interesting or like fun experiments. I just want to talk about a little bit about our AI graduate. We're getting to the end, so I know I want to get some answers. Sorry, I want to get questions so I can answer to you. The AI graduate certificate is funded through the Bauhaus structure, thinking that the design studio is the core of the program. And we have foundational courses. In this case, the foundational course is called Fundamentals of Coding and Computation. So that class is really teaching you words, and it's helping you or is giving you an introduction of what is computing, why do we need computing, and how to write code. But then we go to another layer, which is about how do we talk about AI. So there's a class about AI and ethics, and then there's a class about applying machine learning. So this is the introductional course. And so you don't really need to know anything about AI or coding, but we will teach you how to do it. That's a QR code if you want to see some of the outputs and results of the certificate. And then another thing that I want to talk about is that we organize a yearly symposia. It's called Playing Models. We are right now organizing the 5th session, which is going to happen at CyArk in Los Angeles. We've done it since 2022. And this is a free event. We do it because of the love of AI and architecture. We got the sponsorship from NVIDIA and Autodesk. Thankful for being able to. So if you follow the QR code, it will lead you to the website, and then you can see the next dates. To finish, I really want to talk about what's next. So we know that in 1970, with the Industrial Revolution, we started seeing the Earth as this pebble, as this object, the thing that we can touch. Through the computer and the internet, that Earth became a network of connections. What is next? So I am puzzled about this, and I really want to talk about it with you, because I presented some of my explorative work, some of my real world applications, but I'm trying to figure it out what's next, what 2050 looks like when we think about AI, when we have digital twins, when we use it as a tool or as an instrument. I can offer an answer, but I really want this to be our way to move forward to a conversation of what is the future of our Earth with AI. If I have to guess, right, how do I perceive or envision the future? I think of a world that is interconnected, like the network that we're living right now, but it's able to create digital twins of different scales, from the building to the city. So we can have things that are happening in the building, communicating to the rest of the buildings, communicating to the cities, communicating to the countries, communicating to the world. And not just by the idea of communication, but to be able to answer some of the very hard problems like flooding, for example, or disaster or weather-related disasters that are happening today. So I really want to envision a future where this happens. And to end, I want to tell you that the things that I show you is not me. It's really a group of people that I work with. So we are the Share Lab. And as our name says, the Share Lab is about sharing things. Everything we do is open. We're always happy and ready to collaborate with many fields, many people. So if you're interested, please follow the link. And the Share Lab is really about this idea of AI to empower creativity and AI for social good. If you remember the analogy of this talk, AI to empower creativity is instruments, AI for the social good are tools. So with that, I hope that by the end of this talk, you could think about using AI not only as a tool, but as well as an instrument. I always like to do these future steps just to give you a sense of where I'm going with my work at the Share Lab and with my work as an AI faculty. I've been working with digital twin. I've been working with big data and inference models. Before generative AI was cool, I was doing that, and I think it has a lot of promises, but not only for image or text, but to these structural stability or environmental metrics that are really helpful for us as architects. Right now, I'm really interested in joining human perception with machinic prediction. I think that's where we should go. And I really hope if something out of this talk, maybe you can also think about that. Thank you.
I'm assuming you're willing to take questions.
I think I am.
Do we have questions? I'll try.
I'll try to answer.
Relative to the timeline you showed, there's a couple of different dimensions of AI that remains a huge challenge, right? And one is embodied AI with respect to spatial discovery. So how to inform the AI, if you will, about its spatial positioning relative to assessing a physical environment. Another might be metacognitive AI. So in terms of trying to work with understanding human response, which is part of what you do, right? Understanding human response relative to algorithmic processing. So for example, that the digital twin can not only be applied to a spatial context, but start to anticipate the way that different humans with different abilities or different perceptions might behave in the environment. Like those are two kind of pieces that some folks are working on right now. And I wonder, what do you think of this? What are the biggest challenges?
Yeah. So you may know the work of Fei-Fei Li. So Fei-Fei Li, if you don't know, she is the AI woman. So she's the one that created the first large data set for image recognition and object detection. And because of her, we are able to have what we have today with convolutional neural networks. So she saw that the way forward was to create a large enough data set of examples to be able to train algorithms to do specific tasks. And because of her, we had all of these different AlexNet, which was one of the best ranking models in the 1870s. And then NVIDIA started seeing that AlexNet was the first one to use graphic cards to process the data. And with that, here we are. So Fei-Fei Li, the pioneer, she started a company called Spatial AI. And for me, I find that to be very exciting because one of the limitations, and I think I wouldn't actually call it limitation, but I see as a opportunity for collaboration is that the way that our brain works and the way that we make decisions is very sensorial and spatially driven. And I don't necessarily see that AI needs to go that way for the moment. I know that there are some specific implementations where I will see AI to get a multimodal input, where I was talking about getting text and images and like information in different formats to help be more precise in some predictions. If we talked about space, I still believe that it is intrinsic human reaction to it. So I will use the AI to help me be better, not better, or like I don't like the word better, but I will use it because I of lack of English to make decisions that help make informed decisions based on different layers about how to design space. If then you go to the digital twin, so there is this experiment that I'm doing with trying to collect the student perception of risk when they are in campus. And my dream is to create a kind of a recommendation drawing tool that you will plug into your Rhino. And then when you are designing urban areas or urban corners, this thing or this little beautiful recommender will say, oh, look, if if this step is too low, too high, maybe it will happen something like this. People perceive that this corner needs to be more or less. So it's like you were receiving input actively about a specific thing, which in this case was the feeling of risk. So I think that's something that I'm very excited to work on, and I think that's what I think you are also wanting to know more. How do we inform through AI? How can we have AI tools that can help us make more informed decisions in different tasks that we have?
Sure. I want to try to pull on something you just mentioned in relation to also your question about perception and sort of looking into. And you just mentioned risk. Risk is something I think that we have a good sense is there's a lot of variation in human perception of risk, human experience of risk. It's very culturally defined in a lot of different ways. So maybe part of my question is, how do we begin to think about representing that, the sort of variation, the diversity, the experience of risk in different contexts in these embodiments of these kinds of tools that you might build as part of that process? Because the alternative feels like there might be, in trying to get that, there might be a flattening also.
Yeah.
Like you're taking a lot of variation, a lot of different experiences, and flattening that into sort of suggestions around or different forms or different perhaps defaults, let's say.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you haven't had any thoughts, also about like how to design a research program that would even get you there. Whether it's an empirical one that we would go out and we would sort of test, are you dealing with things like taste, judgment, expertise, things like cultural consensus? How would you do that?
It's a very hard question. So I'm going to try to also have a hard answer. I think a lot of the models that have been made available, they are trying to be generic and they are implicitly not looking or saying or doing things that they don't know. So if you think about these, I think the easiest analogy here will be the generative algorithms, because everybody in this room has used them. So generative algorithms are trained with an enormous amount of data. And then usually these models, they learn from if you think about data, if you plot them into a line, they are plotted into like a bell-like curve. And then most of the data, which is a lot of the same thing, will be under the bell. And then things that are very different or strange will be on the tails, right? These models learn from the bell. So I think that's what you're saying. It's not only flattening, is that it's simply there is not a lot of diversity in the content that you have online, because we can talk about bias and we talk about many things. But my point of attempting at least to create these personalized, or at least semi-personalized models for applications, like in the case of the campus, of a public campus in the United States, it is to also create these tools that are for specific applications for a public campus in the United States. This is a funded research. When I was writing the motivation, one of the feedback that I got is like, oh, but you can apply this for everywhere. And it's so hard. It's really hard because the people that is going to be testing what I created, they are going to be college students, and they have specific needs. They are from specific demographics, so I cannot extrapolate to anybody. If I want to do, so we got approached by a industry campus saying, can you do something like this in our campus? And I say, first I will need to like run the test in a similar setting. So I think probably if to build a research agenda is to build up these case studies and then try to like create kind of a toolkit of saying, if we're going to design urban areas, here are 10, like, the 10 books of Vitruvius that he did for architecture. Let's do 10 books of urban design through risk. Something like this. I don't know if it's an answer, it's just something. I actually think that's already happening today. The idea of stitching models into a set of like a pipeline, like for example, the generative models, they are a set of models working together. And a lot of the startups that are happening today, they are in their core, they're just trying to stitch different models into a pipeline to do something. I actually think that the future of AI in 2050, I am intrinsically positive, as you may notice, will be to come up with cheaper, less data intensive models. I think if we are able to change the way that we're seeing, like I was explaining that the artificial neural networks are just these mathematical abstractions of how we think our brain works. Why do we want to mimic our brain to make decisions? I'm thinking if we're to dream here, I will even say we can reimagine what artificial intelligence is and not a replica of what we think our brain looks like. So with that, I don't think it's an answer, but I will say if I can wish for something, will be to have a different foundational models that are less expensive. When I say expensive, they use less electricity, need less data, and could be personalized easily.
Actually, Coach, thank you so much for the lecture. I'm really fascinated by the image to 3D model that you created. I've been struggling with the same things of it being trained on all sorts of 3D printable items. So it's really fascinating to import it in for like an architecture specific model. And I want to go back to something that you just said about this idea of a different kind of AI model. Because intelligence is being based on this idea of prediction itself. Like, can something predict something, and then on the Turing test, how human is the intelligence? We judged all sorts of intelligence based on how close it is to us. And so you had also brought up in your lecture that you wanted something that isn't trained on the chair or the dog or the cat, that there is something else. So I maybe a question, maybe a speculative question to you is that, like, what could you imagine that we could be tapping into, or kind of intelligence we could be tapping into that could give us feedback that changes the way we design or think about creation?
So one of my masters, I call him master because I follow his work, is Stephen Wolfram. He created a platform called Mathematica. He is a brilliant mind. He has a brilliant mind, and since he's 13 years old, been publishing books. So he's a very interesting person, and in one of his, because he does a lot of like videos explaining his work. He's an interesting person to follow as well. It's easy to follow. He introduced this idea of the in-between concepts. And when he introduced this, I thought this is an interesting way to think about design in creative processes, because when you are in the early years of architectural studies, you use a lot of partie, and you have the gestalt to help you like form, and like you have a lot of like different techniques that we use to help us understand space, create space, recognize space, and so on. That I'm thinking right now, maybe this in-between concept idea has things that we have no name for it, but are inspiring and can help us move forward. Or maybe we can name them in a way that can help us be something else. Like this experiment is done with the initial DALL-E generative tool. So it's not very, it's not like the Nano Banana from Google. So I'm just thinking if I use, they don't have it open source. That's why I cannot test it out. But I was thinking if those models who are generating this very realistic, impressive center image, if we can test them out to open their space, their in-between concept space, maybe we can see things and be appreciative of this type of intelligence, because a lot of the discourse that happens is AI is a tool, and therefore we use it, and therefore I'm the master, that's the slave, I'm like the pilot, and that's the co-pilot. And I find that narrative to be a bit harsh, because we in history known that master-slave relationship doesn't really work out. And I think if you're able to find it to be interesting and to think of it as an agent within your process and something that is inspiring as you are inspiring, it may be helpful for this design process. I don't know the answer. This presentation, I did it just to test what you think about. It is really nothing is certain. It is a lot of ideas, a lot of provocations. What could it be? But for me, what was helpful is to come up with this analogy of the tool and the instrument, because otherwise everybody's talking about the tool and it becomes boring, and is everybody's dinner time talking about AI as a tool.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.